Alrighty. Welcome. Today we're joined by an exceptional guest with expertise and experience in the region. We have Dr. Barham Salih, who is the former Prime Minister of the Kurdish Regional Government of Iraqi Kurdistan from 2009 to 2012. Previously, he was elected Deputy Prime Minister of the Federal Government of Iraq under Prime Minister Maliki. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So on Monday, the Prime Minister of Turkey stated in an interview that Turkey would move ground forces into Syria, quote, if others do their part, end quote. What do you believe will push Turkey to commit ground forces to the fight against ISIL and possibly against Bashar al-Assad?
I think the idea of committing Turkish ground troops into the Syria conflict may complicate matters. We all need to recognize that air power alone will not do it, but there are boots on the ground. There are people who are fighting on the ground, who are willing to take on the extremists. Syrian people who are willing to do so. They need to be empowered. They need to be helped instead of having neighboring countries get involved in this conflict. The conflict is already complicated. We do not need to make it more complicated than it is already is. We have this particular case of Kobani, that town, predominantly Kurdish town along the Turkish border. What we have witnessed over the past month or so, heroic fighters, men and women, and this is a remarkable scene. And I don't know, have you seen the CNN profile of the fighters there? This tells you that people are willing to fight for their freedoms. This tells you that people are willing to fight for what is right, but they need help. Obviously, the American airstrikes have been most welcome, but even the United States acknowledges that this is not enough to defeat the terrorist onslaught. These heroic fighters need assistance. They are asking the Turkish government to allow passage of reinforcements to go to help them, and also the provision of weapons. I believe this will be a better course of action than having the conflict in Syria becoming more complicated by introducing ground troops from Turkey or other neighbors for that matter.
I guess a sort of a follow-up to that, there are many reports of Iraqi army units who threw down their weapons and retreated at the first sign of ISIL. U.S.-funded and trained Iraqi army that we left after our withdrawal in 2011. Do you believe that further reinforcing this army would be a good course of action, or more aid to the Peshmerga or other Kurdish forces that are in the region?
I think the Iraqi army has suffered a major setback, and the setback is primarily due to command and control, and some basic flaws in the system, in the structure, and the corruption that was afflicted on that. It will be some time before we can stand up the Iraqi military again. It is not an issue of military, it is an issue of command and control and the right political direction for the country. We have a serious situation, what happened with ISIL when it attacked Mosul, when it attacked a number of other areas, and for that matter when it attacked Sinjar. The Iraqi army was not well prepared. The Kurdish Peshmergas in certain situations were challenged in a very severe way, but I have to say now the various communities of Iraq have to come together to stand up to this threat, and our prescription for this, our policy recommendation, and this is something that the Prime Minister of Iraq, Mr. Abadi, has accepted and is pursuing, is to set up National Guard units like fighting structures, so that the people of these affected areas will be empowered to defend their territory. They will need help from Baghdad, they will need help from Kurdistan, but this, I think, what it will take, and we need to learn from the lessons of the past. Is not easy to create an army with PowerPoint presentations. It requires a political vision for the country that can genuinely set up a national army that will be committed to those goals. Unfortunately, before faulting the Iraqi military, I fault the Iraqi political leadership for the polarizing policies, for the sectarianism, for the corruption, for the unwillingness to take some of the tough decision that was needed to prevent the re-emergence of ISIS.
Mm-hmm. Something that you pointed on, touched on there, was the idea of a unified Iraq. Some observers have suggested granting Iraqi Kurdistan greater autonomy under a expanded model of federalism due to concerns about the national government, more under Maliki, but even so. Reportedly, revenues from Baghdad to the Kurdish region have stopped due to the upcoming independence referendum. Do you believe that Iraqi Kurdistan and the Kurdish people have more to gain from being part of a larger Iraq or as their own autonomous nation, not region, but nation?
Every Kurd dreams of independence, and it is the right of the Kurdish people to achieve their right to self-determination. Nobody can dissuade me of that fact, and our history has been one of terrible tragedy. And I look around and I see almost every other nation having a flag of the United Nations, and I don't see Kurdistan. That pains me. That is human. That is only honest. One has to say that. But genuinely, I say Iraqi Kurds, at least majority of Iraqi Kurds, voted for the constitution in 2004-5. That constitution, by voting for the constitution, the Kurds accepted to be part of a democratic federal Iraq. I genuinely believe that a successful Iraq, a prosperous Iraq, a stable Iraq will be good for the Kurds. And if Iraq becomes a democracy, if Iraq becomes a federal democracy that is promised and expressed in the constitution, this is not only good for the Kurds, it's good for other communities of Iraq. That, I believe, to date remains the Kurdish position. We would want to be part of a democratic federal Iraq, but God forbid, if Iraq degenerates further, if Iraq becomes condemned to this unrelenting cycle of instability and violence and so on, then that prospects of Iraq's constitution being realized, a federal democracy, will no longer be there. Then it will be a different story. I dare say the following, and I hope this is not just because me being a Kurd saying this, but on average, on the whole, by and large, the Kurdish leadership, the Kurdish community in Iraq, the Kurdish people in Iraq have proven to be true to the mission of an Iraqi democracy, and what we have established in Kurdistan has been a case in point. This is not to say some of us have made a terrible mistake by thinking that we can just focus on Kurdistan and forget about Baghdad, because a decent Baghdad, a stable Baghdad, a prosperous Baghdad is good for us regardless. Even if we were to become independence, we need a good neighbor, not a neighbor that is condemned to violence and to instability. So this debate is ongoing. At the end of the day, the communities of Iraq will have to come to an arrangement. I say unequivocally what we have had from 2003 to 2014 has not worked, has been a failure. I regret to say that the Iraqi political elite, and I was part of the governing elite in Baghdad, I'm not going to say blame it on others. I should also accept responsibility for the mistakes that has committed. We have squandered a great opportunity in Iraq. A lot of resources have been squandered. A lot of innocent lives have been wasted. This time, the conflict has reached such a critical level that the various elements of Iraq need to get together and have a very, very serious conversation. Cannot be business as usual. We have to decide if we want to live together. This is not the way to live together. If you want to salvage this country and move it forward in a way it can assure all the communities of stability, security, and prosperity, then it will require coming to terms with some tough choices for all the communities. But so far, business as usual cannot be. Things have to change in a fundamental way.
In 2008, then Senator Biden campaigned heavily on his proposal to split Iraq into 3 different countries in the wake of the invasion. Of course, when he became vice president on the presidential ticket, this policy was dropped. But now, given that some instability has risen in Iraq and Joe Biden is now still vice president, do you get the sense that this idea is still floating around on the American side of the equation?
I remember when then Senator Biden spoke of the idea of a federal entities in Iraq. He did not talk, to be fair, explicitly about dividing Iraq and so on. The media has taken it somewhat out of context, but you can ask the vice president about what he exactly meant. But this is in my own conversations with him at the time. The idea was a federal structure. Let me pose to you the following. Obviously, I have a Kurdish perspective on things. My views may have been defined by my predicament as a Kurd living in Iraq, suffering the consequences of Saddam's racist and sectarian policies, etc., and so on. My view, the idea of a nation state based on centralized authoritarian government is over. It's not only over in Iraq, but across the Middle East. It's not just a matter of politics and security. It's definitively the case, because in the case of Iraq, what we have a country that is endowed with abundant oil resources. There is a lot of easy money, and whoever is the centralized ruler of the country tends to get access to a lot of money, and that is a recipe for making dictators. There is this old American adage, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I'll add something to it as well, especially when you have easy money coming from oil. That makes it so true. And the history of Iraq has been this. So what you need in a country like Iraq, in order for it to survive, you need to have limited government, and you have to have checks and balances. Checks and balances on authority. You cannot trust people with authority. You need to put in brakes on that. You need to have powerful checks and balances into place. One way is to do devolution of power, decentralization. Whether we like it or not, Iraq is a multi-communal country, has been polarized. Saddam Hussein, and perhaps even before Saddam Hussein, there was sectarian discrimination, ethnic discrimination. This country has profound problems in that sense, and we are burdened with that legacy. Look at the United States, even to date, when it comes to integration of new communities and some of the profound social issues that you deal with. And it's a lot easier than what we're talking about in the Middle East. Imagine the Middle East with the issues of religion, sectarianism, history, you name it. It's profound. People need to be trusted with their running their own territories and so on. Kurdistan is a successful example. There is no reason why Basra should not make decisions about its own education, its own economic development and private sector initiatives, for example. Why should it be all at Baghdad? What has happened with the ISIS attack and the paraphrasing what Prime Minister Maliki once told me in a meeting after the attack on Mosul, the Iraqi military melted away despite the billions and billions of Iraqi and American dollars that were spent on the military. Had we invested more on Mosul-based National Guard type of thing, but accountable to elected authorities and so on, perhaps we might have been better. Therefore, yes, the era of centralized authoritarian government is over. Is over because the politics of Iraq won't accept it, because the security of Iraq won't allow it. But I would say something else to it as well. It's good for democracy. It puts checks and balances on the authority of the central government. And it's good for economic development. It offers people incentive to compete and offer better opportunities here compared to next door neighbors. So that this is the way, this is the history of America. Why is it good federalism in America? Why federalism is good in the United Arab Emirates, which are of the same sect, of the same language, of the same thing. What about a country like Iraq, which is multi-communal, multi-ethnic? So yes, I do believe Iraq will be going towards a significant federal structure. That's my sense, for it to survive. But this will take time. It will take a national dialogue among the various Iraqi communities.
Fantastic. Okay, we have one final question.
Sure.
So as a student-run policy organization, we are always interested in how policy-oriented students can best position themselves to understand policy. In this particular issue, how do you think students can best position themselves to understand international dynamics that can seem especially far away to students at American universities?
To start with, I would tell you, you are very blessed to be studying at Columbia University. I have been witness to what Columbia offers through my son, whom I'm proud of. He graduated here this year. You are at an important moment in history. And being at a university, an American university, you have access to information and to good quality research and data. The first thing I would say when it comes to the politics of the Middle East in particular, read history. History matters. History is a determining factor of how today's politics are defined. It's not just about crazy people are at each other's throats. It's more than that. And don't be too judgmental about it. Because if you look about American history as well, the evolution of the United States Constitution, the debates that you've had between centralization, between the Federalists and the Confederalists, the Civil War, you think of it and put it in proper context, you understand each society has its own evolution path. But the United States, this is for the Columbia students, remains an indispensable leader of the world today. You are studying politics, approaching the international system at a pivotal moment in history. Make the most of it. And education truly matters. That's why having studied in the UK myself, I was blessed to be able to study there. But I had Swara and Kalim, my daughter and my son, study in the United States. I found the American education system to be by far the best in the world. That is why, together with a few friends, we launched an American university in my hometown of Suleimania. So I want to call upon you and come and visit there and mingle with the students and perhaps even Skype and have teleconferences and talk to them and let them understand what America is about and for you to understand what their thinkings and what their attitudes are about life.
Sounds like a fantastic idea for an initiative in one of our centers. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic.
Awesome. You approve? Thank you. I was threatening him. I said, I'm going to embarrass you today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that idea.